Hello. Hello, everyone. This is JavaScript Competency Center Week, the second day. So we are continue our trip to the myth and reality and all the fancy stuff about JavaScript, all things technical. So yesterday we had a very great technical talk about microservices conducted by Alex. So if you missed this talk, just click the link down and watch it. Yeah, this talk was really great one. And today we have the next technical talk, which is called How to Automate Translation with Headless CMS by Nazari. But before we start, let me share some notes to you guys. So first of all, put your comments. Literally, we are live and we are seeking to your opinion and to your ideas. If you do have any questions or any notes or anything that you want to share, just put the comment into the comment section. It will help us a lot. And by the way, this goes two directions. So after the talk, Nazari will choose the best and the most interesting or the most funny question through the session, and this person will get a prize. By the way, yesterday Alex had a very huge number of questions, and he did make a choice. So he picked a manual question about not actually question rather than a note where he pointed his opinion, and Alex truly admired this opinion. So that's why Emmanuel will have his prize. So guys, put your comments and Nazari will choose the best question or the best idea whatsoever. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Instagram and follow us at Telegram as well. We post a lot of good stuff there. So yeah, feel free to subscribe. And right now, we are going to our second talk about how to automate translations with headless CMS. So let me welcome Nazari. He's a great lead software engineer. He's solution architect, certified by AWS, and in general, great guy. Nazari, the stage is yours. Please proceed.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for that lovely introduction. So let's cut to the chase and let's start the actual talk. So yeah, today I want to actually share my experience with like automated translations with headless CMS, and I really want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Like, what's the actual problem you can face while you work in this headless CMS, and when you want to automate translations. And I will spend like quite a lot of time describing the challenge here with the headless CMS, right? But the biggest part of this talk, I want to actually dive into the solution that my team had to build to actually deliver this level of automation. And yeah, as Paul already mentioned, drop your comments, your questions in the chat, and we'll have a questions and answer sessions at the end, right? So let's make sure we're on the same page with regards to the problem we're trying to solve, right? In our case, our headless CMS was an appliance. We initially proposed to use like a contentful to the customer, but this customer already was using an appliance in the past. The employees were used to it, so we stick to the appliance, right? It's good CMS, but its problem is it doesn't have a lot of out-of-the-box extensions. So we had to build a lot of in-house solutions for it. So how does the content structure inside the appliance? So basically, you have like a content repository, right? You have content items. So each repository holds a number of content items of different types. In that way, you kind of group them and group them by a country. In our case, each content repository holds a content for each country. So what do we want to build with appliance, right? So we want to build like a system that allows us to send something for translation, like any content item inside the appliance for translation. It's gonna talk through our translations microservice to our translation vendor. Then whenever a translation vendor return a translation back to us, we want to automatically import it back into Ampliance without involving of a business user, without any manual labor from the customer, right? And we have a queue here just to make sure like we can rate limit the requests, we can process and import everything into Ampliance in a steady pace without any problems. Okay, so what's the problem statement, right? So the customer already is present in 15 countries, and there was like there will be more in the future. So the biggest problem is the solution that it actually should support a growing number of countries as well as the growing number of content items as it with different structures and complex relationship. And here comes the challenge, right? If you have ever worked with headless CMS, you already know that content items, they come in with different flavors, right? It can be a different structure. It can be objects with complex relationships that have multiple content items inside of it. It can be arrays of items. It can be objects inside objects, string numbers. And this creates a big challenge for us if you want to automate translation, because one object may look like this, and you need to translate like a lot of fields from the content. And you need to keep in mind that each content item is kind of unique, right? So we are thinking about solution, how we can automate it and how we can solve this problem. So let's write down our requirements for this. The first and foremost, we want to support a growing number of content types because no one want to spend like days just to release a new content type in a headless CMS, right? We want to be really agile here and being able to launch a new content items and new content types and pages in hours, not days, right? And this also brings another challenge that each content type is kind of dynamic, and we need to support that, as well as support growing number of countries. So our main goal here is to support is to build a scalable solution that can scale with the number of content items and types that we have in our system. Besides of that, we want to be able to configure the solution easily, right? We want to manage which fields translate or not translate, etc. Because you don't want to translate everything in your content item. Sometimes some fields should remain untranslated, maybe some numbers, some dates, author names, etc. And we need to provide such a format for our translation vendor so that he could handle different content types without the effort, because if you build a solution and each content type has a unique format that you need to send to your translation vendor, it creates even more the effort on both for you and for translation vendor to handle it. Last but not least, since the translations can be different in size and length of fields in different countries, you also need to ensure that you are passing a field limits for translation so that the translation vendor does not cross the limit when they are doing the translation. So what is the high-level idea that we have? So just to ensure that we have a standardized interface to do our translations, right? We need to transform this complex ball of mud into an array of fields, right? Unified fields that has the same interface in the same format, so that we could work with them easily. We could send them to a translation vendor so that we could send them anywhere easily to export and import back into the system, right? So here how, in our case, we have defined such an interface. We have defined a translation text. This is basically a field that you want, a content of a field that you want to translate. And then we have a meta object that contains metadata. For example, it can hold a schema for this field that you have defined, like how much you can put such chars here. Is there any restrictions? This is used by our translation vendor system to ensure that the translations are not crossing the limits. The next one field is kind of really important because it shows a path inside an object, right? Which field this is actually belongs to. And then we have a couple of ideas that we're gonna talk about later. So now when we understand the idea, right, we want to transform a big ball of mud into like a simple object. How do we do it? So there's two options. The first one is pretty well-known pattern strategies, right? You could build a number of strategies for each category, for each content item. And the benefit of this, it's relatively easy to implement because it's straightforward, right? You just create like a map of strategies for each content item, for each content type, and that's how we do it, right? And since it's also a well-known pattern, it's everyone could understand it. But there is quite a big cons here that outweigh the benefit, right? It's really high effort to maintain because just imagine the solution grows in size. You add new content items, you add new pages, yada yada, and for each page you need to implement a new strategy. And the second problem is that the solution is not reusable because it's basically really highly coupled with the content types and content items that you have in your system, right? So that's leads us to a second option called unique mapper. That's how I call it, right? Some kind of really high-tech class that could map anything from big ball of mud to a list of fields. Apparently, it's a problem of this solution that it's like a complex one-time implementation, right? It will be harder to troubleshoot because it will be a higher, like a more abstract algorithm that can traverse any content item. But we have really big benefits in this solution. First of all, it's low maintenance cost because now each time you create a new content type, you almost don't need to do anything, right? Because it can map anything by default, and it also supports any content types, right? And the bigger benefit of this is that this option is reusable because it can work with any other content types and not necessarily the ones that you have in your system. How do we build it, right? In the headless CMS, you have a schema that defines a content item. This schema is like a blueprint for any content item you have in your system, and each content item have a schema assigned to it, right? So you need to traverse both schema and the content item at the same time to make sure that you have both content of a field as well as the schema of a field. And it's like a recursive algorithm that iterates schema fields and content item. And if you has any nested items, it kind of goes inside of it. Yeah, the diagram really simplified. It does not include all the difficulties of this piece of iterating schema fields and content items. The most challenging part here is that people can define the same thing in like multiple ways. There is like complex references, etc. And you need to like to support all of that in your mapper to make sure that you can like effectively iterate it and get the content from the content item. And that's people working on this. Like we have built this mapper, and then we realized that there is like less than 5% of cases when the abstract algorithm kind of doesn't fit the need. Sometimes in really rare cases, we needed to apply an extra action on the expert, right? When you need to do extra action to export something from the manual actions. So we built a scene that we call a manual actions. So if a content item has a manual action, that's when we run it. It's basically a custom piece of code that's executed before we like iterate the content item fields. And it's configured per schema or content type. Now when I'm thinking about this in a retrospective, I realized that there was only one case that I remember when we needed. I mean, one use case in multiple content types. And now I think that we kind of could have just removed it and hard coded inside like the algorithm. So we have a list of fields, right? We have built the mapper, we have the list of fields. How do we upload it back? Let's take a look again at the content, at the field schema we have. So each field has ID, right? Kind of a unique ID here that tells you, okay, which content item this belongs to. And in that way, you can resolve all the content items that you need from the translation object. And then when you resolve the translation, the content item, you have a field path that tells you, okay, where should I put these translations? So you can effectively iterate the object and insert the translations back into the specific field from which it came to you, right? So it's pretty straightforward flow. And sometimes there is an edge case. Yeah, there is always an edge case. Sometimes you need to do a post-processing, like maybe you want to transform some field, you want to change something in the content, you want to do any extra changes to post-processing. And for that purpose, we have built like a post-processing system. Again, it was also configurable per schema content type, and the users, and like when you need it, you could define like a post processor, and the flow is pretty simple. You update the content item fields. That's basically the algorithm that we have described in a previous slide. Then before saving the content item, you run the post processors that perform necessary changes to the content fields or any extra actions you want to do with regards to this content item. And then you save content item, and that's how you upload, basically export the translations back into the system, right? So we have gone through the whole flow, right? We have exported it and we have imported back. So what are the results of like building this system, building this complex algorithm? So now for us, it takes like less than 10 minutes to configure translations for new content types. We actually, most of the times you don't even need to configure anything, because maybe you just want to translate everything inside that field. And that's really convenient because now you just define the schema and you're ready to go. It's already translatable. That brings that our investment into this like engineering of this like unique mapper really pay off. And another highlight that we have reused this system, this algorithm, this unique mapper to build another site for the same customer, because they were using endpoints for it as well. And it's really worked out really well for the same reasons that it is a unique mapper that can map pretty much anything. So that's a short summary of like my experience with automation. It's really short and sweet. So let's see if there's any questions about this one.
Yeah, actually, we do have a question from Stepan. Well, basically, he has a question about what's the issue with the translation in place where the text is used. So, like in general.
Let me, I assume like you're asking like, I'm not necessarily following the question, like what is the issue with the translation as part of the text is used, don't have experience with it. So the challenge here is that you have like a lot of countries, right? You have like English one, you have French, etc. And you define all the content here in the English, right? And you don't want to hire like 10x content managers that will do the same in 10 countries or 15 countries. So you want to have automated flows that can translate content from English version to other versions without spending like hours of effort and millions of dollars to hire like all of that content engineers. So that's what you need to have. Speaking of translation in place, maybe it's also you're also referring to some kind of native integrations. Unfortunately, in our case, we didn't have our CMS didn't have any integrations. And another reason why you may want to do a custom integration is when you want to integrate a vendor a translation vendor that does not support like your CMS out of the box.
Okay.
I hope I answered the question, but let me know if you have want to know more
Yeah.
details, leave a comment.
Yeah. Stefan, drop us a message if you're okay with this answer. Right. So we've got another question from Louise. What happens when we have a dynamic text content?
So I assume when you talk about dynamic text content, you mean like rich text fields, right? That's what I assume. And yeah, so you need to work with your translation vendor on this. Our translation vendor kind of supported Markdown and everything. He just was like not touching any Markdown syntax and was translating only the content. But again, I'm really maybe not following what do you mean by dynamic text content. Like all the content you have in the CMS is kind of dynamic, or because a user inserts it and then he saves a content item and send it for translation. So if you could like maybe leave another comment to tell us what in particular do you mean by dynamic text content?
Okay. So let's pause this particular one for a bit. Another question for you, Nazari. How would you apply a hotfix when there is a typo in the translation? Oh, tough one.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so if you remember, we have like you have a vendor and you have like your microservice and all that system that can process the translations. Usually, like a customer, like the actual end user of the system, when they want to correct something, they just give a feedback to the translation vendor, like, "Hey guys, like you did this translation, we don't like it. This is actually like a problem. Can you fix it?" And then in our case, the vendor would edit the translations for that project. So kind of a project that holds all the content items, right, that you have sent, like yesterday, for example. This is like one entity. A translation vendor just edits this field in the project that they deliver it to us, and they just send it one more time to our system, and our system uploads it again, and that's it.
Okay. Okay. Good recommendation. One more. What workflow do you have from content management perspective? Do you have an approval process?
So we have statuses in like num planes. You have different fields here, like whether you allow like when you request something to send to be translated, or whether you actually like when you receive it back. It's all managed by statuses. Speaking of approval process, in particular, there was ideas to do like this based on the statuses, but because some place is kind of limited on what you can do, we agreed that that will be like a user decision, like we do not enforce user, right? So it's a content team who should handle it on their end, like before sending something, like anyways they like it, maybe a Jira ticket they track like to review, or just pin a team member to actually approve it to send it.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. All right. We've got another question. Oh, that's kind of a long one. Just any particular tools you can recommend? Question from Andre.
Uh, it's always no, it always comes to your peak of headless CMS, right? In our case, it was kind of limited in out of the box integrations. So if you take a look, for example, at Contentful or maybe Strapi, you can find like at least a couple of out of the box integrations. For example, Phrase, as far as I remember, yeah, phrase.com. If you take a look at Phrase, you can see that there is a native integration with Contentful, right? So it's always about the research of the headless CMS of your choice and the translation vendor that you want to integrate it with. And if you can avoid building something, I would rather recommend just use out of the box integration. But in our case, it wasn't possible. We had to build something from scratch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. I see your point. All right. Well, that's the good one as well. Have you faced any performance issues when you applied this mapper?
No, the only issues we have faced so far is like the rate limiting of API, because that way or another you are hitting the endpoint's API to get something from the endpoint or to upload something to the endpoints. That's where we have like a bottleneck here. And you need to keep in mind that when you integrate with headless CMS, there is always rate limiting involved, and you can just spam with API calls. That's the only performance issue we have faced. In terms of algorithm, it's pretty straightforward. You just iterate like fields inside two objects in parallel, right? One object is like your schema, and another object is like field, it's actual content. So it's pretty fast. It's in memory operations, but as soon as you need to like iterate like linked content items, you involve like API calls, and that's where we have started to face bottleneck. But it's nothing critical, to be honest. It's a background process. A user doesn't have to wait for it to finish, right? You just mark it to send and forget about it. The system will send it eventually, and you'll receive it eventually. Yep. Hope I answered the question.
Yeah, I do hope that as well. So we've got yet another question from the YouTube user. So how does the system handle translation errors or incomplete translation?
That's a good question, really good question. So let's talk about translation errors. I assume let's make an assumption that when you talk about translation errors, you talk about something went wrong during translation flow, right? So I mentioned in the past that we have like a status fields in endpoints, right? Like a label on a content item. Right now, if something goes wrong, we update the status of that content item to actually have a label translation error. And what we discovered, like we discovered that it works okay. You see the error, but the problem is a customer, actual end user of your CMS, doesn't know the root cause, right? So they will ping you to investigate the root cause. And we're kind of in a process of building like a UI extension for endpoints that will show like different kinds of root causes, that will run sanity checks before sending content for translation. And that's how we handle and how we plan to improve translation errors. Speaking of incomplete translations, we haven't faced it so far. It's a responsibility of translation vendor to provide you a good quality translations. If they can do it, you should probably talk to them with regards to the quality of their work.
All right, cool. Thank you, Nazari. Yet one more question. And
Yeah,
actually,
cool.
yeah, well, we got a lot of time for discussion. Well, of course, you might expect a question about ChatGPT, right? so, it- so yet another note from Andre. So, any experience with generated text? Looks like GPT will open that question, but it has out-of-the-box capability of some languages. So, what about others, if required?
I opens the question buttons. Huh. Yeah, gotcha. So you're kind of proposing to use ChatGPT to generate like a translated text, right? It's a good
Yeah,
idea. Like we have been building this solution before this wave of chat GPTization, when
yeah,
every company was releasing chat GPT or any alternative to it. So it wasn't even on the board. The biggest problem with chat GPT is like privacy policy, right? You can't give it something that may be private or may contain information, because it's definitely will be used by the chat GPT to learn further, right? That's probably the only problem. Another concern with all that AI is sometimes you have legal translations and you can't trust an AI to do a legal translation, because you can end up in a situation that entails like some legal problems for your company, and you don't want to risk that. So you usually interact with a vendor who can do for you a country specific legal translations for vendor who knows a local laws. So I hope I answered your question. Yeah.
yeah. Fingers crossed. But I do see that Andre has
Yeah.
uh, another question. So yeah.
Oh my God.
So Yeah, yeah, but this question is kind of in the queue. So, new question for you. So, how do you handle possible circular references in the content?
Oh yeah, we faced it. We faced it, and do you remember? I think you remember that I mentioned that we have a configurable solution, and we can ignore which fields to translate and which not to translate, right? And first of all, you just do not translate something that can lead to a circular dependency, right? Because sometimes you don't want to translate some fields because they are too, like some content items because they are too big and they kind of should be handled separately, and they're here just for the reference. And second of all, we actually inside of that mapper we actually have a map of fields of content items that we already traversed, right? So we kind of maintain an internal state of all the content items that we already mapped to a unique array of fields, right? So if there is no circle, we kind of fix the problem in these two ways. Configurable fields do not translate, and we have a map that tells whether this item was already traversed or not.
Nice. Uh, one more.
Oh,
Sorry
I
if I
love
missed.
questions.
Sorry if I missed, but have you analyzed different translation providers? Can you share the experience?
So in our case, that was more of a requirement because the customer had a specific translation vendor they have been working with, right? They had like a strategic real partnership with them, so we couldn't just say a customer, okay, let's drop it, let's use another one. But on a high level, I already mentioned a pretty good one that looks okay, like a phrase.com. If you take a look at it, it has like 50 native integrations with different tools, and it could be good place to start with, right? There's also what I heard of is Motion Point, as far as I remember the name, and this could be another good alternative. But again, in the end, the decision is kind of based on your context, right? Sometimes you can't pick a company because of some restrictions or some requirements from your customer.
Gotcha. Right. So let's move on to the next question. Though additional question on tools. You've mentioned web services. How about JavaScript tools that can help us?
We all that is implemented in JavaScript and Node.js and everything. And like JavaScript tools that can help here. Off the top of my head, like, the solution was pretty much built with like raw JavaScript, and I don't remember using anything like uh, specific to actually help us with this, because this is like an algorithm that you need to build to actually deliver this like complex flow of translation. So yeah, nothing that I can recommend here.
Okay, got it. Uh, I don't think that we have any other questions left. So, guys, if you do have any question, just drop it. Um, anyways, um, I assume that basically that's it about the tech talk. Let me recheck all the possible places for the questions. Just a second, Larry. So,
Yeah, the
yeah,
worst. Take your time.
yep, zero questions. So, I think that we may wrap up the session. So that's it.
Yeah.
Literally, that's it. Thank you very much for your really wonderful tech talk about translations. Now we do know a lot of stuff about it. So, literally, дякую, gracias, dziękuję, туда, shukran, merci, whatever. Yeah, thank you. And thank you, the audience, for such a great interaction, for all the questions that you've asked. Nazari, are you in the position to choose the best question of the session right away?
I know.
On top of your
I would
head.
say the question about ChatGPT was kind of the most relevant and the most
Hmm.
modern, I would say, because that's where the trend goes, right? It was an
Oh,
unexpected
okay.
question. I really didn't think about this. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I see. So yeah, so the special prize will go to Andre. Andre will contact you soon about this particular one. So that's it about the comments section. So one more time, Nazari, well done. You did a great job. And before
Yes,
I
thanks.
literally wrap up this session, let me give you some brief and spoiler alert about the things that will happen tomorrow. So tomorrow we will have yet another great technical talk, and this one is called "Do We Really Need Writing Tests?" So this technical talk will be absolutely full of good stuff about pros and cons of writing tests for your JavaScript code, and literally just stay tuned. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, click like button, turn on the notification, follow us on Instagram, at Telegram as well. So stay connected with us, and thank you for being part of this amazing JavaScript competency centered week full of technical talks. So see you tomorrow. Bye.